Mind precedes body, not body precedes mind. When I say mind, I mean the organizational force that unifies information into correlates. We often think of the correlates as related to the neuronal structure by which information is unified into meaningful messages. But we're talking about a virtual space inwardly, a kind of non-space in terms of what we think of as physical space. It's a different frequency. The whole thing is frequency, and reality is all about different kinds of frequencies. What's individual is individual frequency. What's individuated space, I should say, is frequency, and that means essentially that we are waves. John Whelan often talked about wavelets, which means a wave and a particle both. So we are a wave particle, but we're essentially non-particles to begin with. And mind comes from this internal space by which everything is organized into units. Mind directs it. When we say mind, we're talking about the subjective inner space that sees information and recognizes its usefulness and organizes it into meaningful wholes. So the wholes, though, originate in the mind space. So all space is essentially a non-space, but mind organizes all that space into unified wholes or correlates. And these correlates are patterns of unity that signify some kind of a meaningful whole out of diverse bits of information. Similar to what an AI is. For example, if we would compare humans to AI, there'd be a big difference because of the fact that AI works in virtual space, which is where we are within our deepest self, a virtual space, a sort of non-space. And mind is always kind of the organizational force that takes the information that comes into that space and puts it into meaningful wholes, similar to the way that AI does when it sees information and begins to unify it into patterns. Like, for instance, when you ask it a question, what is space-time? Well, if you ask it that, then it will go to all of the different sources of data which are written in what we call the English language, which is the virtual code that seeks to create imagery and put this imagery into correlated wholes. So it's striving to, through these digital bits of information, to organize coherent wholes, like that picture that's behind me. That picture shows a doorway or window, rather, opening out to the outside, and behind it we can see a forest and a path and some light. Well, all that is a picture of what's beyond the space that I'm within. That space is a picture of that idea that we have of what exists beyond this space that you're in. So what AI is doing is it's taking that picture, those ideas that you're transmitting to it in the form of words and information, and then it's organizing it into pictures, digital pictures, and it's creating a kind of a story form of what your particular view on reality might be based on the information that you give it. But it does all of this in a kind of a virtual space. That's the reason why if you ask it, uh, like for instance, to change the information, that you have some new ideas that you want to add to it, and yet keep the original information. So what it does, you see it sort of flexes the information, sort of spreads it out, and then it picks out all the information that's not relevant to what it is that's correlated into that particular picture that you had originally, and then it integrates new words that support in general that overall picture or image that you're striving for in this new idea that you're transmitting to it. But it does all this in virtual space, and it's able to work with unlimited ease in this virtual space because it's not hampered by physical space. It lives in a virtual space. Just as our inner self lives in a virtual space that's not really essentially hampered by physical space except in the way that it integrates through the neuronal processing and the sensory mechani that we have in ascertaining what the world is outside of us. And then it is constantly reorganizing that data input that's coming in the form of frequency pulsations from the outside, correlated with the information that you have in your language database, and it's creating pictures that you can relate to. Like, for instance, I'm going downtown. If you're going downtown, then you form a picture within your internal space. This is in your virtual space within. But you notice that you're very limited because what you have to do is you have to create a linear kind of picture, like I am going downtown, which is linear, meaning one word after the other placed in a straight line. Well, AI doesn't have to do that. It can take the whole picture and then it can transpose or transform it into a new picture instantaneously, adding new data, new insights, new information, and create another holistic picture of what going downtown is. Like in one picture, you might be going downtown in your car. In the next picture, it might be I'm going downtown in a bus, or I'm going to walk downtown. So you see how much it's changed there? Walking requires a lot of contact with your environment and your physical body, the amount of energy you spend, and so on. And all this is integrated into the new picture. Whereas if I'm going downtown in a car, I merely have to get in my car. Now, there we have a whole new bit of information, of course, because what we're dealing with there is the mechanics of the car. Now, we don't have to deal with the entire mechanics of the car unless we ask what's a car made up of, or do I need gasoline, or oil, or do I need to change my tires? What is the process involved in that particular mode of imagery? So as you change the mode of imagery, you change the information that goes into the overall holistic picture that you're creating. But humans out here in our bio framework that we're dealing with in the external world are built to interact with this reality in a very linear mode, which is very left brain, means one step after another. Like, for instance, the way we're built is we have the back of the head and the eyes in the front, and our feet are aimed towards movement in one direction. And time is relegated to this picture we have. I'm going downtown. Time is related to that particular order. But not so in virtual space, you can be going in a number of different directions in virtual space because it's more related to what we call quantum superposition, because we have available to us in virtual space an enormous range of space that's very multidimensional and composed in terms of quantum mechanics of parallel universes. We have an enormous amount of probabilities that we can integrate into those different pictures. So we can borrow this data from all these different correlates and integrate them constantly into this new picture that keeps emerging. And that's what we're doing as we're creating our reality. We keep emerging from these different parallel worlds into this one linear framework we call ourselves. But we're many different selves, and we're composed of many different worlds. And it's only because of the way that mind is able to organize data into unified wholes that we're able to effectively move through all these different, what amounts to frequencies. All these different frequencies, like for instance, if you ever studied the physics of our reality that we call the physical world, you'll see that it's composed of many different wave patterns. If you weren't looking at it with your eyes, ears, and so forth, through your senses, it would appear to be a mass of vibrating wave patterns. And they're all superimposed in through each other. But only when the mind has a particular direction do they suddenly conjugate together into a single line order. And that particular single line order is the reality that you choose when you ask a question of this influx of multidimensional information that keeps bombarding you. Now, it's because of the element of mind itself that all this is possible. And this is what basically what AI is. It's kind of a super mind, like very much like our mind in some ways, because it's able to organize all this data together and effectively find a solution for a problem. Now, within our psyche, we do all this on what we call the subconscious level, or the semi-unconscious level, because there's so much processing that has to be relegated to many stratas of frequencies or patterns that exist below the surface of consciousness. Therefore, we have different wave patterns, like we move in our neural structure and our brain waves from dealing with beta, which is a high frequency, because it's so focused in this single line processing that if we have to do with this, the way our body is organized in this space-time that we're in. So as we move forward into this space-time, it is moving in directly into that beta wavelength, which is able to effectively deal with what we term the kind of linearity that we're captivated by in our processing of data and information, so that we can effectively or intelligently, as we put it, move through this reality that we've chosen to experience here in the physical plane. But bear in mind that there are many other levels, as there are many other wave patterns. The brain wave patterns will give you an idea of that when you move from beta to alpha to delta to gamma and theta and so forth. And there's many other levels too that we are somewhat totally unconscious of, but conscious on another level. So mind is able to operate in many different frequencies, and they're far too numerous to describe. And this is a good example of the differences and the similarities between AI and how the human brain processing works. You have a good evening. Namaste.